Week number 12 of the 2025 fantasy football season kicked off last night on Thursday Night Football in a crazy upset where the Houston Texans defeat the Buffalo Bills. In today's video, I'm going to help you guys right your wrongs from Thursday Night Football or potentially build on the lead that you've created. We are going to be breaking down my top 40 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 12 of the 2025 fantasy football season, telling you guys why I believe each player is ranked inside of each tier. Before we can get into things, though, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you don't have enjoyed today's video, that you make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. We begin with my must-start wide receiver ones: Puka Nacua, JSN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Rashee Rice, Emeka Egbuka, Devontae Adams, T. Higgins, Stephon Diggs, Chris Olave, as well as Justin Jefferson. Now, when it comes to Puka Nacua, this is a guy that is a must-start top 3 wide receiver every single week. Does not matter about the matchup at all. The LA Rams offense is a certified wagon. Matthew Stafford is playing like the MVP of the National Football League, and Puka Nacua is the key piece in this offense. I know he's had a bit of a downward skid over the last 2 games as the wide receiver 17 and 16. Prior to that, though, he was a top 6 wide receiver in all games except for 1. This guy is a lock in your lineup week in and week out, and the 13th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis on Sunday Night Football in a game that reeks of points. I am very excited for what Puka Nacua will do in this spot. Then we got JSN going up against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee, the 8th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. And while there are definitely worries of mine that the Tennessee Titans just end up getting rolled up like a blunt and smoked in this game, even in games where the Seattle Seahawks are winning by a gazillion points, JSN is still feasting. He has been a top 10 wide receiver now over the last 6 games, just 2 games this season outside the top 12. Such a great matchup. You gotta love him in this spot. Then we got Amon-Ra St. Brown going up against the New York Football Giants at home in Detroit. In terms of a matchup for wide receivers, this is going to be the 6th best matchup on a per game basis. Now, Amon-Ra St. Brown did fall off the edge of the earth last week like Humpty Dumpty. He fell off that wall with 2 receptions on 12 targets for 42 yards up against the Eagles in prime time. Now, the Eagles defense looked locked in that game, and Dan Campbell must have smoked some ayahuasca with Aaron Rodgers beforehand because he was just super aggressive in that game. The play calling was bad. I expect Amon-Ra St. Brown to get back to normalcy, right? We're not panicking after 1 down game for one of the best receivers in the National Football League in a matchup that is good. It's the 13th best matchup for wide receivers. Then we got CeeDee Lamb going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, last time these 2 teams played, CeeDee Lamb was the wide receiver 14 back in week 1. And if you guys remember that game, CeeDee Lamb was having struggles firmly grasping the football. So now in week number 12, I get he had a problem last week where he dropped a wide open touchdown, but I digress. He was still the wide receiver 14 last week as well. Again, the Eagles defense definitely deserves their credit. The Eagles defense has been phenomenal over the last few weeks, and this is the 21st best matchup for wide receivers. But again, CeeDee Lamb is CeeDee Lamb. This game has the ability to be very high scoring. You're going to start him. Then we got Rashee Rice going up against the Indianapolis Colts at home in KC. Probably the most interesting game of the week. I know that the Indianapolis Colts are riding super high. The Chiefs, they're not necessarily dead if they lose this game for their playoff chances, but things aren't looking too good for them if they lose this game. This is the 10th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Now, before the bye, Rashee Rice played in 3 games because he was suspended for the first 6 games this season. He was a top 12 wide receiver in all 3 of those games. Then they come out the bye. They go up against the Denver Broncos in Mile High. Things don't go well. He's the wide receiver 34. It is what it is, though. You're just going to brush that under the rug. The wide receiver 1 in an offense that has the ability to score 30-plus points in the expected by Vegas, the highest scoring game of the week, Rashee Rice is going to just go crazy. I just don't know how you can panic after 1 down game against one of the best, if not the best defenses in the NFL. Then we move to Uga Booga Egbuka, Emeka Egbuka going up against the LA Rams in LA. In terms of a matchup, this is the 17th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Now, Emeka Egbuka's issues really aren't all on him. Last week, the offense really looked good, but the problem was Sean Tucker scored 3 touchdowns. So, when a running back gets 3 touchdowns, it's very typical that, your wide receiver 1 isn't going to have a field day, and that was exactly the case. Emeka Egbuka has been kind of on a rocky road this season, like the ice cream after his first 5 games this season where he was really good, but he was the wide receiver 3 in week 10 when they came out the bye. So again, high scoring matchup expectations. Emeka Egbuka has clearly proved to himself his worth in this offense. And if Baker plays like he played last week, as well as in week number 10, there's no reason why Egbuka can't be back in the top 12 conversation. I will note, though, he was limited in practice on Thursday because he is ill. Motherfucker, I'm ill, not sick. So maybe we get an Emeka Egbuka flu game this week. Then we move to Davante Adams going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In terms of a matchup, again, we talked about it earlier with Mr. Puka Nacua. This is the 13th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. Davante Adams has been on fire. Over the last 4 games, he scored 3 touchdowns in week 7, bye week in week 8, 2 touchdowns in week 9, 1 touchdown in week 10, and 1 touchdown in week number 11. So over the last 4 games, the man has scored 7 total touchdowns. I understand that last week was a doozy because he just had 1 reception on 8 targets for 1 yard and a touchdown. But again, we expect this to be a high-scoring game. Davante Adams prior to that was a top 12 wide receiver in 3 straight games. We gave the Gawk 9000 special to the LA Rams offense earlier with Puka Nacua. This is one of the best, if not the best offense in the NFL, and you want to be invested in both guys weekly. Then we got T. Higgins going up against the New England Patriots. Now, I understand that on paper, this is definitely a matchup that is a little bit scary. It is the 15th best matchup for wide receivers, but T. Higgins should be going up against Gonzalez. Whereas normally, you would see Jamar Chase go toe-to-toe with Gonzalez. Obviously, no Jamar Chase this week because he decided to hawk to a spit on Jalen Ramsey, which sucks. Obviously, if you're a Jamar Chase owner, super frustrating. Seems like Joe Burrow might be the starting quarterback in this game. I just expect T. Higgins to get fed. Will this be his most productive game where he drops his nuts and gets goes 5 for 5 for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns? I don't think so, but I think he will get a ton of volume, and on sheer volume alone, he has the upside to be the wide receiver number 1 this week, especially this is another game that I would expect to be very high scoring. Then we got Stephon Diggs going up against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati in terms of a matchup. For wide receivers on a per-game basis, this is the 20th best matchup. Now, Stephon Diggs has been a very tough wide receiver to read all season long because when you look at the roster, you look at the depth chart, he is clearly the best wide receiver on this team. They don't necessarily treat him that way. But over the last 2 weeks, 8+ targets in both games. Over the last 4 weeks, he scored 3 touchdowns. So he was the wide receiver 9 last week. I know that was the baby game. He got the baby boost just like Khalil Shakira got last night on Thursday Night Football with that crazy hook and ladder. Meanwhile, Al Michaels is sitting there acting like nothing happened at all. I don't know how many more games I can do with Al Michaels before I just fucking get so bored and just mute the thing. He puts you to sleep. The craziest thing ever could happen. Someone could throw a 100-yard touchdown, and he wouldn't even move a muscle, okay? It's time to get rid of him, if I'm being honest with you. Him and Herb Street, it just ain't doing it. Now, going up against the Bengals again, high-scoring game. I do still have my worries about Stephon Diggs, but at the end of the day, I like this matchup for him, and I think last week is a true turn-the-page moment towards what Stephon Diggs will be for the rest of the season. Then we got Chris Olave going up against the Atlanta Falcons at home in this game, obviously at home in New Orleans, right? Where else would it be if they were at home? Going up against the Atlanta Falcons defense is going to be the 16th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. Chris Olave is a guy that gets it done basically on sheer volume alone. Doesn't matter how good Tyler Shuck is. Didn't matter how good Spencer Rattler was. This was a guy that was going to get spoon-fed the football. Now, Tyler Shuck looked very good up against the Carolina Panthers prior to the bye, and that obviously was able to skyrocket Chris Olave's value. How likely is it that Tyler Shuck is actually the answer? To me, doesn't seem very high, like he's Allen Iverson, but 5 receptions on 8 targets for 104 yards and a touchdown last time out. This is a game that should be close. So I do think Kamara is going to have a decent game as well. But Chris Olave is this offense, right? Alvin Kamara used to be the offense. Now it's Chris Olave's time to shine. And as long as Tyler Shuck is just halfway decent, I would expect Olave to finish as a top 12 wide receiver. Then we got Justin Jefferson going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now, it absolutely irks me to rank Justin Jefferson this low. I would just love to lock him in as a top 5 wide receiver weekly because I think Justin Jefferson is still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. I understand that his fantasy production doesn't show that, but the reason why his fantasy production has been in the fucking toilet, it's been in the gutter with the clown from It, is because of the quarterback play. J.J. McCarthy is incompetent. J.J. McCarthy has been playing like straight up ass last week especially, and Justin Jefferson struggles. 5 receptions on 9 targets for 61 yards as the wide receiver 26. Justin Jefferson noticeably very angry on the sideline, sitting on the bench. Now, they talked to him this week, and Justin Jefferson didn't crash out. He didn't go full A.J. Brown. He was, given the glaze. Like, he was sucking off, metaphorically, of course, J.J. McCarthy, which, is a good way to do things, Act like everything's okay. But Justin, we know nothing is okay, right? Your quarterback sucks ass. So, while he is so great, and while you're never sitting Justin Jefferson, you have to be worried at this point. Again, I'm not saying J.J. McCarthy's a bust after, 5 or 6 NFL fucking games, but it ain't looking great. The 23rd best matchup for wide receivers. You're still playing him, though. Now we move into tier number 2, which is going to be the must-start high-end wide receiver 2s, which is going to be Michael Pittman Jr., T-Mac, Jameson Williams, George Pickens, Michael Wilson, Devontae Smith, and A.J. Brown. Before we break down the rest of the wide receivers, though, in today's video, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends, our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you receive a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds as well. As if you play $5 on the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How does the pick'em work? It's incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower. If those picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher. But obviously, all the picks need to hit. Make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, Michael Pittman Jr. was down bad in Germany prior to the bye, 2 for 2 for 19 yards as the wide receiver 62 after back-to-back games as a top 9 wide receiver. We have talked about this all season, but Michael Pittman Jr. has been the Webster's Dictionary definition of boomer bust. He is either on top of the world, top of the charts, back in your hearts, number 1, top 12 guy, or he is so down bad that you wish you could hop in a Hyman machine, right? You wish you could, that's almost what I said. You wish you could hop in a time machine and stop him. Stop yourself, I guess, from playing him. Hold yourself back, right? Now, this week up against the Chiefs, I understand that if you are a matchup guy like I am, you love looking at the matchup. This is the 28th worst matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. But this is expected to be the highest scoring matchup of the week. And Michael Pittman Jr. is a guy you expect to get 8+ targets weekly. So while the matchup might perturb some people, I'm still rocking with him and I still feel very confident in him. Then we got Tetairoa McMillan going up against the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco, the 6th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Now, Tetairoa McMillan is a wide receiver that I absolutely adored this summer. I was going to bat for Tetairoa McMillan day in and day out. I was giving him the gawk 9,000 special, metaphorically, of course. And, based on the play of Bryce Young, this has been an up and down season. It has not been, smooth sailing for Tetairoa McMillan. There have been some crazy waves. But at the end of the day, Tetairoa McMillan, when Bryce Young figures things out, will be a locked and loaded high-end wide receiver 2 or top 12 wide receiver every single week in your rankings. Last week, he's the wide receiver 2, 8 receptions on 12 targets up against the Falcons in Atlanta for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, right? He has all of the ability. If Bryce Young can give us what he gave us at the end of last season, maybe he's just a late season guy, then Tetairoa McMillan has league winner written all over him, and the matchup here is too juicy based upon what he did last week to rank him lower than this. And we got Jameson Williams going up against the Giants. So while the play calling didn't really go the way of Amon-Ra St. Brown, while Jared Goff looked very bad, Jameson Williams, ever since Dan Campbell took over as the play caller, has been the wide receiver. 8 last week up against the Eagles, 4 of 7 for 88 yards and a tug. And the wide receiver 2 up against the Commanders in Washington, where he had a touchdown, 119 receiving yards, 6 receptions on 7 targets. He has scored a touchdown now in 3 straight games. In terms of a matchup, up against the Giants. This is a great one. This is the 6th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. So you have to bang the drum for Jameson Williams at this point. I said last week, hey, after one great game, I am a little bit more pessimistic to believe that it's truly Jameson Williams' season right after that Commanders game. Then he does it again, right? It's starting to become a pattern. I don't know what the fuck whoever was calling the plays beforehand was doing, that Jameson Williams wasn't a much bigger piece in this offense, but now that he is, it's fantastic for the team. Moving forward, we got George Pickens going up against the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I talk about this every single week, but when CeeDee Lamb is healthy, George Pickens' floor is much lower, right? Because if CeeDee Lamb wasn't there, the floor for George Pickens would probably be like the wide receiver 18, whereas now the floor is like the wide receiver 28. The ceiling, though, the moon, the big upside is still very much present, whether CeeDee Lamb is healthy or not. We saw that last week up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. He has 9 receptions on 11 targets for 144 yards and a touchdown as the wide receiver number 3. And he was even suspended for the first drive of the game, as was CeeDee Lamb. He was chilling on the bench because apparently he was out drinking with CeeDee Lamb the night before. Ain't nothing wrong with that. So, they served their 5-second suspension. And again, while the floor may not be as high for George Pickens, the ceiling is the moon. He's been a top 28 wide receiver at minimum every single game this season outside of week number 1 up against the Eagles, but that was his first game as a Cowboy, so brush that one under the rug. You gotta love J-Mo. Then we got Michael Wilson going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Michael Wilson absolutely exploded last week. I was someone that said, hey, you can start Michael Wilson, but it's kind of at your own risk. I get the matchup is great. But how likely is it that he's the true wide receiver 1, right? Maybe he is, but then maybe you see Trey McBride get 20 targets, right? And Michael Wilson ends up being a guy that, sure, you were happy that you played because he was okay enough, right? But not a guy you're, writing home about, telling your mom, hey, I got Michael Wilson in my lineup. Instead, he's the wide receiver 1, 15 receptions on 18 targets for 185 yards as the wide receiver number 1. Now he has the 14th best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. So this should continue until Marvin Harrison Jr. comes back. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to get 18 targets again. I think he's going to be more likely to be a wide receiver 2 than he is to, finish top 12 again. But the upside is certainly there. Then we got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown going up against the Dallas Cowboys. Now, both of these guys are very risky bets week in and week out, right? I could see the Philadelphia Eagles beating down on the Dallas Cowboys in this game, and maybe Dallas Goedert has 2 touchdowns, Saquon has a touchdown, and Jalen Hurts is a tush-push touchdown. And then Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown are absolutely iced out like that Little Pump song, right? This is the best matchup for wide receivers. So you're going to go up to the plate and swing at the fastball, right? You are going to swing with Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. Will it work out? Your guess is as good as mine. But you're not sitting them in the best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. Last week, Devontae Smith scored a measly 2 fantasy points. A.J. Brown, much more involved. 7 receptions on 11 targets for 49 yards as the wide receiver 21. The play calling from the Philadelphia Eagles has been atrocious as of recently. A lot of Eagles fans are calling for the head of the offensive coordinator, Kevin Petrulio. We'll see what happens with that. Again, wet dream matchup. A.J. Brown was getting fed last week. The same thing here. He should have a good game. Now we move into tier number 3, which is going to be the mid-range wide receiver 2s with Wan'Dale Robinson as well as Rome Odunze. Now, the fact that we're not getting Jackson Dart definitely hurts like a butt cheek on a stick. I would have felt very confident telling you guys this whole week that Jackson Dart is going to be back, and obviously now he is not. So that sucks. But Jameis Winston gave this guy 9 targets last week. He has had 9+ targets now in 3 straight games. So while obviously I would prefer Jackson Dart to be under center compared to Jameis Winston is still going to throw the ball out there. Jameson Williams. Wan'Dale Robinson is still going to get his opportunity to get targets. with Jameis Winston. This is the 12th best matchup for wide receivers. So while it didn't go great last week up against the Packers, I would project it would go pretty well this week in the 12th best matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Then we move to Rome Odunze. Now, Rome Odunze has been just so frustrating this season. You can feel just the utmost confidence in playing him last week because, hey, the guy was the wide receiver 8 the week before. They gave him 10 targets. He looked good. Him and Caleb looked like they're on the same page. And then last week, him and Caleb Williams are back to being on different pages of a whole different book. Right? Just completely bad. Right? And if you look at the last 4 games, he's been the wide receiver 8, then the wide receiver 98, then the wide receiver 8, and then the wide receiver 54. So if you notice a pattern, good game, really bad game, good game, really bad game. So since he had a really bad game last week, fantasy definitely works in patterns. It's a guarantee. Bet your life that he is going to have a great game. Obviously, that would be foolish because that's not how fantasy works, but it's the 3rd best matchup for wide receivers, so I like his chances this week of bouncing back. Now we move into tier number 4, the low-end wide receiver 2s with Alec Pierce, DK Metcalf, and Zay Flowers. If you guys have enjoyed today's video thus far, hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Alec Pierce, first guy in, last guy out, lunch pail type of guy here. Bad matchup up against the Chiefs, like we talked about with Michael Pittman Jr. But again, expected to be a very high-scoring game. Alec Pierce is on fire. NBA Jam style back-to-back weeks as a top 15 wide receiver. While they still use Josh Downs, they use Michael Pittman Jr. Obviously, Alec Pierce should be either the leader or second in terms of snaps. Him and Daniel Jones have a great connection. 7+ targets in back-to-back weeks. I get the matchup might be a little bit scary, but we talk about this all the time. When players start to play very good, they start to build momentum. You want to stay on the train and not jump ship. Then we got DK Metcalf. Speaking of momentum, DK Metcalf has 0 momentum. He has negative momentum. Over the last 3 weeks, he has scored 10 or fewer points in all games. And in weeks 9 and 10, he had 10 total combined fantasy points. He is going up against the Bears this week, though. The 5th best matchup for wide receivers. So if the chakra was to ever align, if the stars were to ever align for a great game for Metcalf, it would be here. Because frankly, he doesn't have a great game here. We're going to have to start really taking his ranking, picking it up, and moving it somewhere else. Picking it up and dropping him down the rankings because he shits the bed again. How many times can you go to bat for a guy that continues to screw you over? Then we got Zay Flowers going up against the New York Jumbo Jets. Zay Flowers feels like a very nice floor play. With Lamar Jackson back, he scored 11 points in all games, and he has that big upside, which is definitely strange for Zay Flowers, because Zay Flowers is more of the guy that when you think of him in the past, it's boom or bust, right? You're either on top of the world, Kilimanjaro, you're banging the drum for the guy, and he goes crazy. Right? Like week 1, where he scores 28 fantasy points, or he's down bad and gets you like 4 fantasy points. But this season, he has been uber consistent. He is going up against a Jets defense that allows the 19th most points to wide receivers on a per game basis. So I feel safe about him. If we're talking about safety rating, he's probably the safest guy in this tier. But I also think DK Metcalf, if Rodgers plays, you already know what's going to happen. Aaron Rodgers hates the Bears. Metcalf should have a good game. Now we move into tier numero 5, which is going to be my high-end wide receiver 3s with Juwan Jennings, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Khalil Shakir was in this tier as well. Obviously, Khalil Shakir goes nuclear. I liked him this week, but there definitely was worries about the Texans' defense, and the Texans' defense came to play. Just Khalil Shakir had a good game. Obviously, Josh Allen did not. Then we got Juwan Jennings. Now, I would love to rank Juwan Jennings higher. A lot of people are coming after me. Nick, why do you not have Juwan Jennings ranked higher? Nick, why don't you like Juwan Jennings more? Well, it's very simple. Because Ricky Pearsall is back. So that hurts the value of Juwan Jennings. I think Ricky Pearsall will ingrain himself further into the offense this week. Now, Juwan Jennings could still be the number 1 target, but there's going to be more competition. So that is why I feel that way. I'm not saying that you need to, go out and protest against Juwan Jennings and not put him in your lineup, but there's also the 30th best matchup for wide receivers. So a lot of people need to, slow the roll slightly on Juwan Jennings, who was the wide receiver 36 last week. Now we got Christian Watson going up against the Minnesota Vikings, currently listed as questionable with a knee injury. Now, losing Tucker Kraft has clearly elevated Christian Watson to become the number 1 target inside of the red zone for the team. Last week, we saw that pay dividends, where he's 4 of 5 for 46 yards and 2 touchdowns as the wide receiver 7. The problem with Christian Watson and why I can't rank him higher is incredibly simple, because of the fact that he doesn't see a boatload of targets. Sure, the touchdown upside is there, and we will fully acknowledge that, Roman Reigns style. But at the same time, if you're getting 4 targets, then 5, if your ceiling is 5 fucking targets, how likely is it that you're going to have a good floor without the touchdowns? So that's really just my concern. Plus, it's not a good matchup. It is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 6th worst matchup for wide receivers on a per game basis. Then we got Romeo Doubs. Now, Romeo Doubs should be getting more targets. That's good. That might make him a little bit safer. But the upside feels a lot less significant with Christian Watson gobbling in the red zone looks. Then we got tier number 6, which is my mid-range wide receiver 3s, even though it's just one guy. It is going to be Professor X, Xavier Worthy, going up against the Indianapolis Colts in terms of a matchup at the wide receiver position. This is the 10th best matchup for wide receivers. Xavier Worthy has been down bad as of recently, but you kind of already know what is going to happen one of these weeks with Xavier Worthy. He hasn't been as consistent as of recently since Rashee Rice's return, but Xavier Worthy is the kind of guy that you blink, and he scores 25 fantasy points. You blink, and it's a 20-yard, it's a check down from the 20-yard line where they run some type of screen, or maybe, they just do anything. It's not a far throw, and, it's a slant. And Xavier Worthy is fucking gone like the wind, and it's a touchdown, right? And up against the Colts in a high-scoring game, this might be the, pick a guy and let it fly. Pat Mahomes says, F it, Xavier Worthy out there somewhere, and throws him a deep ball, and he scores a touchdown. Is Xavier Worthy safe? Fuck no, baby. But with the upside, he deserves this ranking. Now we got tier numero 7, which is going to be the low-end wide receiver 3s with Trey Tucker, Ricky Pearsall, Jordan Addison-Ray, and Brian Thomas Jr. Now, Trey Tucker last week takes full advantage of the Cowboys' wet dream matchup, 4 receptions on 8 targets for 47 yards and a tug as the wide receiver 16. Now he goes up against the Cleveland Browns, a defense that I think is going to have Geno Smith just completely out of whack in a funk. It's the 24th best matchup for wide receivers, but Trey Tucker is the clear alpha wide receiver on this team. Regardless of how skilled you think he is, he should get a boatload of targets. So he should be fine, and the ceiling is very high. Then we got Ricky Pearsall going up against the Carolina Panthers. Again, rough matchup, just 2 targets last week. But I feel like they kind of used the just the tip approach last week, and they're going to start ramping up his workload. And earlier on in the season, he was a guy that was pretty reliable. So while I definitely have my reservations, which is obviously why I'm not banging the drum much more highly for a guy that I loved all summer, because maybe they are just going to keep slowly ramping him up, right? He gets 2 targets last week. Maybe he only gets 4 this week, right? But Ricky's a guy I could see getting 12-plus targets in any given game. Then we got Jordan Addison-Ray going up against the Green Bay Packers. Now, in terms of the matchup up against the Packers, this is the 23rd best matchup. Jordan Addison has been down horrendous with J.J. McCarthy, but he has gotten 7-plus targets in back-to-back games. So once the connection starts to work, I think Jordan Addison has big upside. But as of right now, you just probably don't feel the best about him. Then we got BTJ, who's currently listed as questionable. We shall see how the injury report goes for him today on Friday. Your guess is as good as mine currently as I'm recording this on if he is going to play or not. When he has played this year, just 1 game inside the top 12, a lot of games under 10 fantasy points. And if I'm being honest with you guys, I thought this summer when I was talking up Brian Thomas Jr., it made perfect sense. BTJ produced with Mac Jones, so he's going to produce with Trevor Lawrence. It turns out Mac Jones is way better than Trevor Lawrence, and it also turns out that BTJ and Trevor Lawrence just don't have a great connection. Now, it was starting to work, right? You could see the connection starting to formulate around week 6, but then the guy gets hurt, and he's missed the last 2 games, so maybe that connection is lost. Now, we move to tier number 8, which is going to be the wide receiver 4 tier with Josh Downs, Jacoby Myers, Kayshon Boutte, Darnell, here comes the Mooney, Greg Dortch, Wiki, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Tez Johnson in this tier. So, Josh Downs going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, Josh Downs is clearly the wide receiver 3 on this offense in terms of snaps. He's not going to play a ton of snaps, but over the last 4 games, he has a touchdown in 3 of 4 games. So while the targets are bouncing all over the place, Josh Downs seems to be very involved. So while the floor is very low, he scored 1 fucking point last game out, the ceiling is pretty high. Then we got Jacoby Myers. Has Jacoby Myers surpassed Parker Washington on this depth chart in terms of targets? We shall see. He had 5 receptions on 6 targets last week for 64 yards as the wide receiver 22. I think this is an exciting game against the Arizona Cardinals. So Jacoby Myers gets ranked here, even though I might not love him. Then we got Kayshon Boutte going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Kayshon Boutte is expected to play. The Bengals matchup on paper may not be the most ideal. It's the 20th best ranked matchup, but you already know Kayshon Boutte could explode. The problem with Kayshon Boutte is just that the targets are not a guarantee for him. And with Diggs kind of rising like a phoenix up this offense, that really knocks Kayshon Boutte down a peg, right? Over the last, let's just do a sample size of 4 games. Now, week 9, he gets hurt. He only has 1 target, but we can kind of just abandon that game, right? The week before that, 5 targets, scores a touchdown. He's the wide receiver 12. The week before that, 2 targets. He's the wide receiver 24 because he scores a touchdown. The week prior to that, 5 for 5 for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns, the wide receiver 4. Now, why is he ranked this high if you can't trust his targets? Same reason why Josh Downs is ranked so high. Because of the touchdowns. Then we move to Darnell Mooney. Now, Kirk Cousins under center. Bad news. Drake London out. Bad news for the offense, but good news for Darnell Mooney. Kirk Cousins only gave Darnell Mooney 4 targets last time out against the Dolphins without Drake London. It seems bad, but we know Darnell Mooney's good enough. At least he used to be. Maybe Unk don't got it no more. Then we got Greg Dortch going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. No Maserati Marvin Harrison Jr., so that elevates Greg Dortch. Now, Greg Dortch did get a Mickey Mouse touchdown. Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He whipped out his mouse tool at the end of the game and found the end zone. 6 for 6 for 66 yards and a touchdown. Back-to-back weeks with the touchdown. Wide receiver 12 last week. Good matchup against the Jaguars defense. The 14th best matchup. So again, no one should be oogling and ogling over Greg Dortch, but you can start him. Then we got Wiki DJ Moore. Now, DJ Moore is on my shit list. DJ Moore is on the last, he's like, it's a last-ditch effort. If DJ Moore fools us again, everyone unanimously should drop this guy like he's hot. I've been tired of him for weeks. I've been, kind of speculating about, the matchups have been good. You can talk yourself into DJ Moore. This week, it's the exact same thing. It's the 3rd best matchup for wide receivers on a per-game basis. So while DJ Moore has been down bad, and while Luther Burden may have surpassed him, I'll give him one last trot out there, before he gets whacked. Then we got Jerry Jeudy going up against the Las Vegas Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. Now, 2nd best matchup for wide receivers. Now, we talked about Jerry Jeudy last week, and we talked about him earlier on in the week. And I say every single week, Jerry Jeudy is a guy that you don't want even coming close to sniffing your lineup. Jerry Jeudy goes out there in week 10 up against the Jets. 6 receptions on 12 targets for 78 yards and a touchdown. And I say, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. A broken clock is right twice a day. Don't play Jerry Jeudy. And people are like, Nick, I gotta play Jerry Jeudy. Did you not see what he did up against the Jets, Nick? And then they play him. And then they get bent over a table when he scores 5 fantasy points. And they're like, Nick, you're right. You're a genius. I'm like, I know. I'm only kidding, of course. But Jerry Jeudy has a great matchup against the Raiders. Maybe Shadur Sanders is going to push some life into this offense. He's going to hit the offense with the defibrillator, right? And revive them. Hit him with the little revive. Hit him with the reboot van, okay? Is that a guarantee? Fuck no, baby. But up against the Raiders, I'm willing to roll the dice. Then we got Tez Johnson. Seems like Chris Godwin may return. That is bad news bears for Tez Johnson. I was all over Tez Johnson last week. Pause. Going up against the Bills. I'm painting the picture like I'm Bob Ross of a high-scoring game of a tit-for-tat, rock'em, sock'em, robots matchup between the Buffalo Bills and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You look at the score at the end of the week, you're like, holy cannoli. That's going to be a big... If you didn't watch it, you saw the score, you would think, okay. Egbuka goes crazy. Tez Johnson gets a touchdown as well. Wrong. Sean Tucker has 3 touchdowns. Baker Mayfield has a rushing touchdown. Hez Johnson does diddly squat. 2 fantasy points. Godwin being back hurts like a butt cheek on a stick, but I would still be willing to roll with Hez Johnson in this spot. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video to help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Hope you guys have a great one. As always, good boy!